It's strange, the specific details the brain chooses to archive when you are convinced you are about to die. I do not remember if I prayed. I do not remember if I thought about my parents, or my ex-wife, or the project deadline I was missing at work. I do not remember any profound life flashing before my eyes montage. What I remember is the sound of the zipper on my North Face tent. It was a heavy-duty YKK number 10 zipper, the kind designed not to snag, the kind I had paid extra for. Zzz. A slow, rhythmic, metallic teeth grinding sound. It was not a continuous zip. It was hesitant, deliberate, like someone was savoring the friction of the metal. It is 2025 now. I live in a secure residential complex in the Gold Coast neighborhood of Chicago. I am on the 14th floor. I have a fob for the lobby, a fob for the elevator, and a deadbolt that costs $300 on my front door. But every single night, before I can get into bed, I have to check the window latches 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Because I know now that locks are just social contracts. They only stop people who agree to play by the rules. And what I met in the Cascade Mountains, it did not know the rules. Or maybe it just did not care. To understand why I was there, you have to understand who I am. Or at least who I was back in October 2022. I am a supply chain logistics manager for a mid-sized medical device company. My entire life is built on predictability. I track shipments. I analyze risk. I create contingencies for contingencies. If a shipment of surgical steel is delayed in Rotterdam, I have a plan. If a hurricane hits the distribution center in Florida, I have a plan. My brain is wired to organize chaos into spreadsheets. That year, though, the chaos was internal. The post-pandemic supply chain collapse had burned me out in a way that sleep could not fix. My doctor called it adrenal fatigue. My therapist called it depersonalization. I just called it the noise. The constant ping of Slack notifications, the hum of the server room, the traffic on I-90. I needed silence. I needed to be somewhere where the only variables were the weather and my own 2 feet. I did not just decide to go camping on a whim. That's not me. I planned this trip with the same rigor I applied to a quarterly audit. I spent 3 weeks researching dispersed camping locations in the Washington Cascades. I did not want a campground. I did not want RV generators or screaming kids or communal bathrooms. I wanted level 4 isolation, accessible by a 4x4 vehicle but far enough off the grid that cell service was a memory. I chose a spot in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, about 15 miles up a gravel logging road that had not been serviced since the late 90s. Satellite imagery showed a clearing near a snowmelt creek. Perfect. Logical. Isolated. I spent the Saturday before the trip at REI. I remember the receipt total, $1,452.68. I bought peace of mind. I bought a North Face Wawona 6 tent, way too big for one person, but I wanted the vestibule space. I bought a Yeti Tundra 45 cooler because the reviews said it was bear-proof. I bought a Jetboil flash cooking system, a pristine canister of isobutane fuel, and a Benchmade bug-out knife with a blue handle that felt weightless in my pocket. I was trying to buy safety. I thought if I had the best gear, the most expensive equipment, nothing could go wrong. That's the arrogance of the rational man. We think we can engineer our way out of the food chain. I left Seattle on a Tuesday morning, October 11th. The sky was that specific shade of aggressive gray you only get in the Pacific Northwest. A low ceiling of clouds that promised drizzle but threatened a downpour. I drove a 2019 Subaru Outback, dark blue with fresh all-terrain tires. I remember the smell of the car interior, stale coffee from a travel mug and the faint, chemical scent of the new waterproofing spray I treated my boots with the night before. The drive was supposed to be 3 hours. Took 5. I stopped in a town called Enumclaw for gas and supplies. I remember standing in the aisle of the grocery store, debating between brands of beef jerky. I chose the Tillamook old-fashioned style. It's thicker, peppered, less processed. I bought a 6-pack of hazy IPAs, 2 gallons of distilled water, and a bag of Honeycrisp apples. Felt mundane. Felt safe. I was just a guy in a fleece vest buying snacks. The transition happened when I turned off the paved highway onto Forest Service Road 23. The sound of the tires changed instantly. From the smooth, hypnotic hum of asphalt to the crunching, popping grumble of gravel. The trees closed in. In the city, trees are decoration. Out there, they are the architecture. Douglas firs and western hemlocks, ancient and moss-draped, looming over the road like cathedral pillars. I drove for an hour without seeing another car. The deeper I went, the more the radio signal faded. First, the NPR station dissolved into static, then the classic rock station until it was just me and the auxiliary cord playing a downloaded playlist of Steely Dan. Deacon Blues was playing when the road became a rutted track. My GPS had lost signal 20 minutes prior, but I had downloaded the offline maps. The blue dot on my dashboard screen floated in a sea of gray grid lines. I was just data in the void. I reached the coordinates around 3:00 p.m. It was beautiful. I have to give it that. The clearing was a natural break in the canopy, carpeted in a layer of brown pine needles that absorbed sound like acoustic foam. The creek was about 50 yards away. A clear, rushing ribbon of ice melt over smooth gray stones. The temperature was dropping. My dashboard thermometer read 52 degrees Fahrenheit. I killed the engine. That silence. That's the first thing that hits you. It's not a lack of sound. It's a presence. It's a heavy, physical weight. When you turn off a car engine in the deep woods, the silence rushes in to fill the vacuum, pressing against your eardrums. Tick, tick, tick. The cooling metal of the Subaru's engine block was the only man-made sound for miles. I stepped out. The air smelled of wet decay, pine resin, and cold stone. It was crisp, the kind of air that feels like it's scrubbing your lungs. I stretched, hearing my back pop. I felt good. I felt justified. This was exactly what the spreadsheets could not give me. I spent the next hour setting up camp with military precision. I laid down the ground tarp. I pitched the north face Wawona, staking down every guy line at a 45-degree angle, just like the manual suggested. I set up my kitchen on a flat rock near the fire ring, the jet boil, the cooler, a collapsible water jug. By 4:30 p.m., the light was starting to fail. The gray sky was deepening into a bruised purple. I decided to gather wood before it got fully dark. This is where the rationalization started. I was about 100 yards from the campsite, collecting fallen hemlock branches. The wood was slightly damp, but I had brought fire starters, little cubes of compressed paraffin wax. I was not worried. I heard a snap, not a settle of the woods snap, not a squirrel dropping a pinecone snap. This was the heavy, wet crunch of a boot breaking a significant branch. I froze. I was holding a bundle of sticks against my chest, the rough bark scratching my fleece. I held my breath, straining my ears against the rush of the nearby creek. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded thin, swallowed instantly by the moss and the vastness of the trees. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then, the wind picked up, rustling the high canopy. Shoo shhhh. I waited a full minute. I told myself it was an elk. Or a deer. The brain is an amazing editor. It will cut and paste reality until it fits a narrative you can handle. That's big game country, I told myself. Elk weigh 700 pounds. Of course they snap branches. I turned back toward the camp, walking a little faster than before. The sensation of being watched is a cliché in horror movies, the prickling on the back of the neck. But medically speaking, it's a survival instinct. It's your amygdala processing micro cues that your conscious mind has not caught up with yet. A shadow in the periphery, a scent that does not belong. When I got back to the clearing, the tent looked welcoming. A bright orange dome of safety. I dumped the wood in the fire ring. I shook off the feeling. You a city boy, I thought. You just adjusting to the baseline anxiety of nature. I got the fire going. It took 2 of the paraffin cubes, but soon I had a decent blaze. The smell of wood smoke, acrid, comforting, primal, created a perimeter. Humans have been doing this for 1,000,000 years. Build a fire, push back the dark. I cooked dinner. A ribeye steak I'd brought in the cooler, seared in a cast iron skillet over the grate, with a side of instant mashed potatoes. I remember the sound of the steak sizzling, hiss, pop, sizzle, and the smell of rendering beef fat mixing with the pine smoke. It was arguably the best steak I've ever cooked. I drank one of the IPAs. It was cold, bitter, and grounded me. By 7 p.m., it was pitch black. And I mean the kind of darkness that has weight. In Chicago, it's never dark. There's always the ambient orange glow of sodium vapor lights reflecting off the clouds. Here, the darkness was absolute. My headlamp, a black Diamond Storm 400, cut a cone of white light through the blackness, illuminating dust motes and flying insects. I was sitting in my collapsible REI camp chair, reading a paperback thriller, trying to relax. The fire was dying down to coals. That's when I smelled it. At first, I thought the wind had shifted and blown some smoke back into my face. But this was not wood smoke. It was a sickly, sweet smell, like copper and spoiled milk. I sniffed the air. It was faint, drifting in from the edge of the clearing, from the direction of the road. It reminded me instantly of a dead raccoon I found under my porch a few years back, combined with something chemical, like ammonia. Bear, I whispered to myself. My heart rate spiked. I knew bears stank. Wet fur, musk, rot. This had to be a bear. I stood up slowly, putting the book down. I reached for the bear spray I had holstered on my belt. It was a bright orange canister, the safety clip still on. I unclipped the safety. I scanned the tree line with my headlamp. The beam swept across the trunks. Gray bark, green needles, black void. Gray bark, green needles, black void. Hey bear! I shouted, using the deep, authoritative voice the rangers recommend. Get out of here. Go on. Nothing. The woods were dead silent. Even the crickets seemed to have paused. I stood there for 5 minutes, the canister slick in my sweating palm. The smell faded as the breeze shifted. I sat back down, but I did not read. My senses were dialed up to 11. Every rustle of a leaf was a footstep. Every pop of the fire was a gunshot. Rationalize it, David, I told myself. Maybe there's a dead deer nearby. Maybe the wind carried the scent from miles away. You are alone. You are safe. I decided to turn in early. The open air felt too exposed. I wanted the illusion of walls. I doused the fire with water from the creek, creating a cloud of hissing steam that smelled like wet ash. I double-checked the Subaru locked. I put all the food, the trash, and anything with a scent inside the bear-proof cooler and locked it in the back of the car. I followed the protocols perfectly. I crawled into the tent. It was spacious, cleaner than my apartment. I took off my boots, leaving them in the vestibule. I stripped down to my thermal layers, merino wool long johns and a gray t-shirt. I crawled into my sleeping bag, a mummy-style bag rated for 0 degrees. I lay there in the dark, listening. The tent nylon flapped gently in the wind. Flap, flap, ripple. I checked my phone. No service. No SIM, the screen mocked. I turned it off to save battery. I must have drifted off. The fatigue of the drive and the adrenaline crash finally caught up to me. I slept. I do not know what time I woke up. You know that feeling when you wake up instantly with 0 grogginess? Your eyes just snap open, and your heart is already hammering against your ribs. The silence was gone. I could hear breathing. It was not inside the tent. It was right outside. Close, inches from the nylon wall near my head. It was wet, congested. It sounded like someone trying to breathe through a throat full of fluid. My entire body went rigid. I did not breathe. I did not blink. I stared up at the darkness of the tent ceiling, my hands gripping the sleeping bag so hard my knuckles popped. Bear, my brain screamed. A bear sniffing the tent. But bears sniff. They huff. Sniff, sniff, huff. This was not sniffing. This was steady, rhythmic respiration. This was watching. Then a finger, or something that felt like a finger, traced a line down the outside of the tent wall. Scritch. The sound of a dirty fingernail dragging against tight nylon. It started at the top of the dome and slowly, agonizingly, traced a line down to the ground. The fabric depressed inward where the pressure was applied. I could see the indentation in the faint starlight filtering through the rainfly. A bear does not do that. A raccoon does not do that. Is someone there? I asked. My voice was a broken croak. I hated myself for speaking. I sounded weak. The breathing stopped. The fingers stopped. For 10 seconds there was absolute stillness. Then, a voice. It did not come from the height of a standing man. It came from low to the ground, as if the speaker was crouching or lying prone right next to my head. Water, the voice said. It was not a demand. It was not a question. It was a statement. The voice was raspy, dry, like two stones grinding together. It sounded unused. My mind raced. A hiker? An injured hiker? Someone lost? I swallowed, trying to find saliva. I have water. Are you hurt? Water, the voice repeated. Same tone, same flat effect. I sat up slowly, the sleeping bag rustling. The sound seemed deafening. I reached for my headlamp, which was hanging from the gear loft loop in the center of the tent. I'm coming out, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I have water bottles in the car. I'm going to unzip the door. No, the voice said. I froze, my hand inches from the zipper. No? I whispered. No light, the voice said. Hurts. The rational part of my brain, the logistics manager, started filing a report. Subject is photophobic. Possible concussion. Dehydration. Hypothermia. Disorientation. Okay, I said. No light, but I need to open the tent to give you water. Yes. I took a deep breath. I grabbed my Benchmade knife with my right hand, flicking the thumb stud so the blade locked open with a silent click. I held it behind my back. With my left hand, I reached for the zipper of the inner mesh door. Zip. I opened it about a foot. The vestibule, the mud room of the tent, was still closed off by the outer rainfly. I had to unzip that too. I reached through the mesh and found the outer zipper. Zip. I pushed the flap aside. The night air rushed in, cold and smelling of that same coppery, spoiled milk scent, but much stronger now. It made me gag. It was dark, but my eyes had adjusted. I could see a shape crouched by the fire ring, about 10 feet away. It was not a hiker. It was a man, at least biologically. He was wearing an oversized yellow parka, an old 1980s-style Gore-Tex jacket that looked filthy, smeared with mud or grease. He was wearing jeans that were shredded at the knees. He had no shoes. His feet were pale, caked in dirt, and looked wrong. Too long. The toes were splayed out unnaturally. He was crouching on all fours, not kneeling, crouching like a spider, hands flat on the ground, elbows up. He was not looking at me. His head was hung low, his long, matted hair obscuring his face. I have water in the car, I said. My voice was trembling violently. I need to go to the car. The man did not move. Water, he said again. But this time he did not say it with his own voice. He said it with mine. It was not an impression. It was a recording. It was perfect playback. Water. It was the exact tone, pitch, and tremble I had used 30 seconds ago. My stomach dropped out of my body. The primal brain took over. Predator. Mimic. Danger. Who are you? I stammered. The head snapped up. I wish he had not done that. I wish he had just stayed looking at the dirt. There was no light, just the moon, but I saw enough. His skin was slack, hanging loosely off his skull, like he had lost 50 pounds in a week. But his eyes were wide open, unblinking, and they were reflecting the moonlight like a cat's eyes. That tapetum lucidum eye shine. Humans do not have that. Humans have red eye in photos, but we do not glow green in the dark. He smiled. It was a slow, stretching movement that revealed gums that were black and receding. Who are you? He repeated. Again my voice, my pitch, my fear. I scrambled backward, crab walking deeper into the tent, away from the door. Get away! I screamed. I have a gun. I did not have a gun. I had a 3-inch folding knife and a can of pepper spray. The thing tilted its head. It seemed confused by the volume. It did not flinch. It just vibrated. A low, thrumming sound came from its chest, like a large cat purring, but deeper. Ch-ch-mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. Then, with a movement that was too fast to track, jerky, glitchy like a video buffering, it scuttled backward, not turning around, just reversing on all fours, vanishing into the darkness of the trees. I sat there, knife shaking in my hand, staring at the empty black triangle of the open tent door. I should have run to the car right then. I know that. I know you re-screaming at me to run to the car. But I was paralyzed. The logic center of my brain had crashed. I could not process the physics of how he moved. I could not process the eyes. I reached out and zipped the rainfly shut. Then the mesh door. Zzz. I locked the zippers together with a small carabiner I used for my keys. A meaningless gesture. If that thing wanted in, nylon and a carabiner would not stop it. I sat in the center of the tent, hugging my knees, the knife point facing the door. I looked at my watch. 2:14 a.m. I had 4 hours until sunrise. The next 2 hours were an exercise in psychological torture. Every wind gust was an assault. Every falling pine needle sounded like a footstep. I replayed the encounter over and over. The eyes. The voice. The smell. I tried to rationalize. Drugs, I told myself. Methamphetamine psychosis. He's a junkie living in the woods. The eyes were just a trick of the light. The voice was, he's just good at impressions. He's crazy. I almost believed it. Almost. At 4 o'clock a.m., the temperature dropped. I could see my breath in the tent. Then I heard it. Walking. Not the crouching scuttle from before. Bipedal walking. 2 feet. Heavy boots. Crunch. 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 Coming from the road. Walking right up to the campsite. The footsteps stopped right next to my car. I heard the door handle of the Subaru being pulled. Thunk. It was locked. Thunk. Thunk. He pulled it again, harder. Then silence. Then, a sound that made my blood turn to ice water. Beep beep. The sound of my key fob unlocking the doors. I patted my vest pocket. Empty. I had left my keys in the pocket of my fleece jacket, which was hanging on the back of the camp chair outside. Beside the fire ring. He had my keys. I heard the car door open. Creak. I heard him rummaging around. The sound of plastic shifting. The cooler being unlatched. He's stealing my food, I thought. He's just a thief. He's gonna take the cooler and leave. The car door slammed shut. Footsteps again. Walking toward the tent. They stopped at the vestibule. Right where my boots were. I held my breath until my lungs burned. I gripped the knife so hard my hand cramped. David, the voice said. It was not my voice this time. It was a woman's voice. Soft. Maternal. David, open the door. It's cold. It sounded like my mother. My mother who has been dead for 6 years. Tears streamed down my face. I bit my lip until I tasted blood to keep from screaming. This was not drugs. This was not a junkie. David, please. The voice whined. It shifted pitch, distorting, becoming electronic and garbled at the edges. Open the door or? I did not move. Then, the zipper tab on the rainfly jingled. He had found the zipper. Zzz. He pulled it down an inch. Zzz. Another inch. He was teasing me. He knew I was in there. He knew I was awake. Zzz. The zipper moved slowly, painfully. I watched the metal slider descending, revealing the strip of night sky. I saw a hand. Not the dirty, clawed hand from before. This hand looked clean. It was wearing my leatherwork glove. He had put on my gloves. The vestibule flaps parted. I was staring through the inner mesh door. The mesh was the only thing separating us. He was standing there, wearing the yellow jacket, but he had put on my fleece over it. It was stretched tight, ready to burst. He was wearing my spare beanie, pulled low. He crouched down so his face was level with mine through the mesh. The eyes were still glowing, but the face, he was trying to make a face. That's the only way I can describe it. He was contorting his slack, gray skin to mimic an expression. He pulled his lips up in a rictus grin. He widened his eyes. He held up a bottle of water. One of the bottles I had bought. Water, he said, using my mother's voice. He pressed the bottle against the mesh. You said, water. I lunged. It was pure instinct. I screamed, a raw animal noise, and stabbed the knife through the mesh screen, aiming for the face. The blade punched through the netting. But he was fast, inhumanly fast. He jerked back before the steel could touch him. He stood up. He did not look angry. He looked disappointed. He dropped the water bottle. It landed with a soft thud on the ground. He looked at the tent, then at the car, then back at me. Then he started screaming. It was not a human scream. It was the sound of a rabbit dying, magnified 10 times. A high-pitched, warbling shriek that vibrated in my teeth. It went on without a breath, for a full minute. Then, abruptly, he stopped. He turned and walked away. Not running. Walking. Crunch. 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 Into the woods. I did not sleep. I did not move. I sat there, knife in hand, staring at the hole in the mesh, listening to the wind. I waited for the sun. The longest 3 hours of my life. When the gray light of dawn finally filtered through the trees, I did not feel relief. I felt exposure. I unzipped the door. I crawled out. The campsite was trashed. The cooler was overturned, but not opened. The food was scattered, but uneaten. He had not wanted the food. My keys were sitting on the log by the fire pit, placed neatly, perfectly aligned with the edge of the wood. I grabbed them. I did not pack the tent. I did not pack the cooler. I left $1,400 worth of gear right there in the dirt. I ran to the Subaru. I jumped in, locked the doors, and hit the start button. The engine roared to life. I threw it into reverse, backing over the fire ring, crushing the metal grate. I did not care. I drove down that mountain like a maniac. I bottomed out the suspension twice. I nearly slid off the road into the ravine. I did not check the rearview mirror. I could not look. I was afraid I'd see that yellow jacket running behind me on all fours. I did not stop until I reached a gas station in Packwood, 40 miles away. I sat in the parking lot, shaking so hard I could not unbuckle my seatbelt. I called the police. 2 deputies came out. I told them a version of the truth. I told them a transient had attacked my camp. I left out the glowing eyes. I left out the mimicry. I knew how that would sound. They took a report. They drove up there to check. They called me later that afternoon. Mr. Reynolds, the deputy said, his voice sounding confused. We found your campsite. Tent S there. Car keys were, well, you have those. But we did not find any signs of a struggle. No footprints other than yours. That's impossible, I said. It was muddy. He was barefoot. Sir, the ground around your tent is undisturbed. Just your boot prints. I hung up. I drove back to Chicago the next day. I sold the Subaru. I could not stand the smell of the interior anymore. I tried to move on. I went back to work. I focused on the supply chain. I focused on logic. But 3 months later, I was scrolling through a forum, a missing persons board for the Pacific Northwest. I do not know why. Morbid curiosity. I found a thread about a hiker named Marcus L. Missing since 1999. There was a photo. He was wearing a yellow Gore-Tex parka. And in the comments, someone had posted a link to a police report from 2005. Another hiker had reported a wild man in the same area. The description. Subject mimicked reporter's speech. Subject appeared to have dilated, reflective pupils. I closed the laptop. I moved into this apartment building because it has 24-hour security. I checked the locks 3 times a night. But here is the thing that keeps me awake. The thing that the locks ca not fix. When I stabbed through the mesh door, I did not miss. I know I did not miss. I felt the resistance of the blade hitting something. But there was no blood on the knife. And when I look at the scar on my memory, that image of him standing there in my fleece jacket, I realized something I missed in the moment. The zipper on my fleece was zipped all the way up to the chin. I never zipped my fleece up. I hate the way it rubs against my neck. He did not just put it on. He knew how to use the zipper. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls off Lake Michigan and rattles the window panes of my 14th floor fortress, I hear it. Zzz, zzz. And I wonder if he is still practicing, learning, getting ready to come back and finish the conversation. Because he has my scent. He has my voice. And he knows exactly what I am afraid of.